Welcome everyone to Family Law Now. Before we dive into our topic, let me just quickly go over some housekeeping items. While we are here to provide you insights on separation and divorce, but please remember that any information shared in this series should not be taken as legal advice. Today we're talking about parenting plans. We will go into tips and considerations for creating one. And towards the end, I will be sharing how you can get a free 20-minute consultation with one of our lawyers, so stick around until the end. On to our introductions. We have with us Stephanie. She's been with the firm since 2018. She was called to the Bar of Ontario in 2022 and is now an associate lawyer at the firm. Steph completed her undergraduate degree at Queen's University and obtained her law degree from the University of Liverpool in 2020, graduating with first-class honors. Steph, like everyone else you see on our screen, is trained as a collaborative practice lawyer, and she is committed to assisting clients through what is traditionally a difficult time by approaching matters with empathy, integrity, and compassion. Joseph is an articling student at the firm. He is set to be called to the Bar of Ontario in June 2024. A graduate of the Ted Rogers School of Management at Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly Ryerson, and Queen's University Faculty of Law. As he enters the next phase of his legal career, Joe is committed to positively influencing the lives of those facing family difficulties. Outside the office, as we know, he indulges in hockey and unwinding with comedy movies. We also have Russell here. He is the founder and senior partner at Russell Alexander Collaborative Family Lawyers. With over 25 years of experience, he uses his knowledge and expertise to serve his clients in all aspects of family law and helps them cope with the difficulties of separation and divorce. Russell has written 4 books and is a fully trained collaborative practice lawyer. He speaks at conferences on collaborative practice, marketing, technology, and the law. Lastly, there is me. I'm a law graduate from Osgoode Hall Law School. I'm an articling student at the firm with plans to be called to the Bar of Ontario in June 2024. I'm focused on launching my legal career in family law. I'm dedicated to providing empathetic and proficient legal support for those navigating family-related complexities. We will jump right into our topic now, and I will give it away to Steph. Steph, can you get us started for parents who are looking to draft a parenting plan? What are some elements that should be included in a comprehensive plan?
Yeah, of course. So a parenting plan is that it's a plan. So this is where you're going to outline what the future looks like for you and the other parent involved in your family. So the first step is to establish a regular parenting schedule. So where the children will be living, on what days. Usually the regular parenting schedule is focused around the school year. Is this something that is in every other weekend with one parent, and then the child lives primarily with another parent during the week? Is it a week about? So on week 1, the child resides with one parent. Week 2, the child resides with the other parent, and it keeps going back and forth that way. So it's best to think about, what's practical and what's in the best interest of the child. Whenever we're talking about parenting plans or anything to do with the children, the test and what you want to keep in mind is what's going to be in your child or your children's best interest. So in addition to the regular parenting schedule, you also want to turn your mind to holidays and special days. So March break, winter break, the summer, long weekends, Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays. Often those days can generate conflict or disagreement. So it's always better to incorporate those special holidays in a comprehensive agreement. So there's really no, last minute scrambling or conflict as the years progress. You also want to note if there is a conflict. So say, what's the name that Russ always uses? Timmy, Jimmy. So say little Jimmy is
little Johnny.
Little Johnny. So say little Johnny is scheduled to be
Johnny's going through a lot of trauma.
He's going through a lot.
Every Tuesday night, right?
So let's say little Johnny is scheduled to be with
That
Joseph.
actually comes from a Norm Macdonald joke.
Oh, does
Uh,
it?
yeah, it's the funniest joke out there. I'm not going to get into it tonight, but that's where the little Johnny comes from. Go ahead. I'll tell you about it later.
Okay. So say little Johnny's scheduled to be with Joseph this upcoming weekend, but I don't even know, but Mother's Day is approaching. So Shanza wants little Johnny and Shanza's care for Mother's Day. You have a regular parenting schedule and a holiday schedule that are conflicting with one another. So you want to ensure that you put into your agreement which schedule would prevail should there be a conflict in the days. So another thing that would be essential to include in your parenting plan, in addition to the parenting time, is outlining what are the parental responsibilities, the decision-making responsibilities. So will both parents share in those decisions, or joint decision-making responsibility? If the communication isn't very productive or you're not able to make decisions jointly, maybe you want to decide or you want to agree to split categories up. We also refer to that as, split or parallel parenting. So say Joseph, Joseph and Shanza, your mom and dad today. So say Joseph is, he'll have final say on education, and then Shanza will have final say on medical decisions. They should still be conversing with one another and consulting one another. But if they reach an impasse or they can't get over a hurdle, one parent would have final say on one topic, the other would have final say on the other, and that just sort of alleviates that back and forth or roadblocks. So another thing to consider is that's the decision making is for medical education, things like that. But typically we see the resident parent or the parent who the child is currently with, they would have like the day-to-day decision making, what's for lunch, what are they going to wear, what activities are they doing for that day. So that's sort of the decision making component. Another thing that I would strongly encourage parents to include in a parenting plan is communication guidelines and protocols. So are the two of you going to communicate through text, through email, through a parenting app? Are you wanting to set parameters around reasonable response times? If, Shanza wants to enroll little Johnny in, hockey, and registration's coming up, but Joe's not, providing a response, what's a reasonable amount of time before Shanza has to take the next step? You have to, despite two parties going through a separation, when you're parents, you are going to be forever intertwined in each other's life. So trying to establish healthy, positive communication guidelines and protocols from the outset can be very, very helpful as you continue to progress. I know I'm sort of listing, spitfiring. There's so many great things to include. Another good thing to include is travel and vacation protocols. Are you going to have a blanket signed consent to travel? Do you want to have a clause that details, neither parent is going to unreasonably withhold their consent for the other parent to travel? How many weeks per year are you agreeing for each parent to be allotted to travel with the child or the children? And which parent is going to hold the documentations or, the passport, SIN number, or sorry, SIN card, birth certificate of the children. You want to outline all of those little things that may become an issue later on. The other thing to consider is planning for special circumstances. Do you want to have a plan or a protocol to introduce new partners or blended families to the children? The last thing that, or two more things to highlight about including in a comprehensive parenting plan would be the financial considerations. So we'll talk a little bit more about this as, this series or this event goes on. But you want to outline the financial considerations. So child support, extra expenses, or special expenses medical costs that aren't covered by health insurance, health benefits, are both parties going to keep the children on the health benefits, life insurance, education costs, a provision about exchanging disclosure each year to update the child support provisions. So there's a lot that goes into parenting plans, especially if you want to make them comprehensive and, all encompassing. And the last thing I will strongly urge people, listeners to consider is including a dispute resolution clause and detailing what might, trigger a material change in circumstance where you have to come back and revisit the parenting plan and either, make amendments to it or, it triggers sort of a varying factor. So is there anything else that I that I didn't include?
Yeah, great overview, Steph. I think you kind of talked about how it should be practical and sufficiently detailed. And that's exactly what you did with all the elements that you mentioned should be included in the plan. And I think as we progress today through the event, we'll talk more about the elements that Steph hit on. So stay tuned. We'll go into more details. I know, Steph, you shot fired them, but we So I think one thing that you mentioned was actually the best interest of the children. And I think that's what we should start with, because that really does go into the whole body of the parenting plan. And Joe, I'm hoping you can speak on that and how to go about drafting a plan that's best for the children and the relationship with both parents.
Yeah, for sure. So creating a parenting plan that works well for both parents and that prioritizes the needs of the children requires several things, all with an encompassing goal, focusing on the children's best interests. So Steph did mention a couple of them. I'm just going to expand on them in a little bit greater detail. Open communication is really, really key. So if you're going through this process, start by having that open and honest discussion, conversation with your co-parent about both your schedules, your preferences, as well as the needs of the children. Really important to make sure that you're listening actively and expressing your own concerns and desires in a respectful manner. That's always key. No one's going to know what you're thinking unless you verbalize it. So it's really important to get your opinions across, but in a respectful manner. With respect to the children's needs, it's really important to consider the ages, the personalities, the activities that they're already enrolled in or would like to be enrolled in the future. Typically, younger children may need more frequent transitions between homes, as opposed to older children, teenagers, adolescents who may prefer longer stretches of time in certain homes or in each home. It's also really important to factor in their school schedules, any extracurricular activities, as well as any social commitments they may have. Another big thing that people often omit from their thought process is the idea of consistency and stability. It's really important to aim for consistency and stability in the parenting schedule to provide a sense of security for your children. Try to keep the routine as predictable as possible, but it's also good to remain flexible to accommodate any changes when necessary. Another thing that often raises some alarms with parents is the idea of a fair division of time. It's really important for parents to strive for this equitable division of parenting time between both parents. I know it's really difficult, but it is a really important factor to consider. And when we talk about equitable division, that's not equal division, it's equitable division. So this could mean alternating weeks, it could be weekends, or it could be dividing the week between households. It's really crucial for parents and co-parents to be willing to compromise and to adjust the schedule as needed. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but the idea of flexibility, it's crucial to recognize that flexibility is really a key to co-parenting success. Things happen, unexpected things happen, whether that be events, work commitments, and personal emergencies may arise. So parents should always be prepared to make those adjustments to the schedule when necessary. That goes back to the beginning where the idea of open communication and maintaining those lines of communication with your co-parent to be able to handle those changes in a smooth manner. Steph did touch on this as well, the idea of various communication methods. It's really important to determine the best methods of communication between co-parents for any scheduling discussions, updates on the children's activities, whether that be extracurricular or at school, and emergencies in general. This can include phone calls, text messages, email, or on a co-parenting app. A couple of them that we recommend, or sometimes the judges impose on parents, is Our Family Wizard as well as App Close. Steph mentioned this as well, but it's really important for co-parents to respect each other's boundaries. Respecting each other's boundaries, and that also includes parenting styles. Parents are going to be parenting differently, so just because one parent parents differently doesn't mean that it's necessarily an incorrect way of parenting. On that note, avoiding criticizing your co-parent in front of the children and refrain from using them as messengers between households is crucial. That's also listed in the judge's rules for separated parents, which we will provide at the end of our show in our notes. I touched on this already again, but being able to review and adjust the parenting schedule. Regularly reviewing the parenting plan to ensuring that it continues to meet the needs of your children and both parents as well. And again, parties should be willing to make those adjustments as the children grow older or as circumstances change. And finally, seek help if needed. We're always going to be there for you guys. And if you're having difficulty reaching an agreement, consider seeking the help of a mediator, parenting coordinator, or legal counsel who can facilitate those discussions and help you create a parenting plan that works for everyone involved. I know that was
Got a question. The more complicated we make it, the more it will cost. The more often we meet, change the plan each year, the more money it will cost. How many couples limit the expenses and they don't agree on all these? How can they limit their expenses? We're going to talk about this question some more.
Yeah.
But complicated and detailed can be good. I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but if you have it written down, you can refer back to it, and that's the agreement. If it's vague, you're going to share a summer holiday. What the hell does that mean? Now you're in court, right? You don't agree what sharing looks like. We'll talk about it some more. Great question. We're going to come back to it though.
Yep, and thanks Russ for taking that up, and thank you, Joe. I think you hit some really important points there. Maximizing contact with both parents, communication. I think it's the children's right to be with their parents, and it shouldn't be minimized. I also do want to bring it back on holidays and vacation. I know Steph kind of talked about that and how to incorporate that into your parenting plan. But Joe, I'm back on you. What do you think are some considerations that should be taken into account when you're kind of drafting holiday schedules or vacations or any special events?
Yeah, so when creating that parenting schedule, it really is crucial for parents to consider the holidays, the summer vacations, or even vacations throughout the year, and any other special events to really ensure that the schedule accommodates these important occasions and as well maintains a sense of balance for both parents and children. With respects to advanced planning, parties should be able to discuss and plan for holidays, vacations, and any special events well in advance. This allows both parents to make necessary arrangements and ensures that the children can really participate in these occasions with both parents when possible. Mentioned it earlier, but this is best done through a parenting plan or parenting agreement, or even through a separation agreement. With respects to equitable distribution, it's really important for parents to aim for an equitable distribution of holidays, vacations, events between both parents. It's also possible for parents to consider alternating major holidays each year, or dividing the days so that children can spend time with both parents on important occasions. Also, if one parent maybe has more parenting time throughout the year than the other, due to, for example, maybe their distance from one another, it may be necessary to give the other parent more holiday parenting time. flexibility always seems to circle around. It's really important that parties are flexible and willing to negotiate with your co-parent regarding the vacation and holiday schedules. Consider the unique circumstances of each parent and really be open to making adjustments as necessary. Communication also seems to be a topic that circles back, but really maintaining that open communication with your co-parent regarding any holiday plans, special events is really, really key. Also important to discuss any concerns or conflicts that may arise, and that you both work together to find that mutually agreeable solution. Oftentimes within these agreements, parties will have to communicate in advance regardless by certain days for which weeks, for example, of the summers that they want exclusively for themselves and which the other parent doesn't have parenting time. So that's often incorporated into those agreements. Regarding children's preferences, parents should be taking into account the preferences and desires of their children when planning for these special events and holidays. Important to consider their age, their interests, and relationships with both parents when making these decisions. Concerning that, you should also be considering if they're going to be enrolled in a day or overnight summer camp when making these decisions as well, especially when you're allocating summer holiday schedules. Another one that often does get overlooked, but is becoming increasingly more important, is the idea of traditions and customs. So considering any family traditions or cultural customs that are important to both parents and children when planning for holidays and special events is important. Parties should be respectful of each other's traditions and really work together to incorporate them into the parenting schedule. That can be, for example, if both parents are of different religions. For example, if the father is Catholic, then maybe allocating the Catholic holidays to the father, whereas if the mother, for example, is Jewish, then maybe allocating the Jewish holidays to the mother. If both parties are of the same religion, oftentimes sharing those weekends or those special occasions or those days or even alternating years is quite effective so that both parents can celebrate with the children. Compromise. So like, again, another reoccurring theme, really important for parents to be willing to compromise and to be flexible when it comes to holiday and vacation scheduling. It's really crucial for parents to focus on what the best interests of the child are and to strive to create a schedule that allows them to enjoy meaningful time with both parents. That should be the main key, the main focus of any parenting agreement is what's in the best interest of the children. And that leads to documentation. Document those holidays, document the vacations, any special events, document that schedule as part of the parenting plan or separation agreement. This allows the ability to avoid misunderstandings or disputes in the future, and including details such as dates, times, transfers, pickups, and any specific arrangements or accommodations are crucial. Sort of going back to what the question was asked, more oftentimes than not, more information and more intricate plans actually save you headaches, time, costs in the long run. So it's really important to have those parenting plans flush out everything so there's no misunderstandings in the future.
So Joseph, when you say equitable distribution, in simple terms, I think what you're saying is what's fair. Is that right?
What's fair, because sometimes what's equal is not always fair, right? So like I mentioned as an example earlier, if you have, for example, maybe if, Shanza's the mother, she lives close to the child's school and I maybe live 45 minutes away. So it wouldn't make sense for me to have the child throughout the entire week, especially if it's more difficult for me to take the child to school, little Tommy to school. So sort of to make it fair, make it equitable, maybe I'll have increased summer holidays. I'll have more weeks than Shanza would during the summer months, just to sort of create that balance.
Little Tommy, little Johnny's buddy. And then,
did I say little Tommy?
So let's just flesh this out, because he said something that's really important that I want our audience to get. You want to follow the best interests of the child. So you're not going to, in my view, my suggestion, and maybe everybody's going to disagree, I'd like to hear the panel. You're not going to compromise just for the sake of getting a deal when that particular parenting schedule may not be in little Johnny's best interest, right? You know, you just did a 5-day trial on this, Joseph. So I think that's always paramount. Would you agree, Seth?
Oh, absolutely. You know, if it used to be the maximum
Yeah.
contact, right? That used to
Maximum contact, yeah.
So, but the law has shifted and really does focus on what's in the child's best interest. If one parent, say, isn't capable, you know, maybe they are struggling, or you know, there's safety concerns, you're not going to want to split parenting time evenly just for the sake of being fair if that's not going to be in the best interest of the child, right? So it's just, you know, every parenting plan is unique, it's different, and it's to be tailored to your specific circumstances. These are all things that you want to consider. And like Joseph, like Russ, like, you know, we're going to talk about probably continuously throughout today, is really focusing on what's in the child's or the children's best interest.
Maximum contact created a lot of havoc, right?
I think a lot of judges,
That made it a
whether
bit,
they want to say it or not, they still sort of follow it, especially in Ontario.
but it makes it a bit the parent, not the child, right? You know, we're changing the custody arrangement to make maximum contact. Well, what about best interest and routine and stability and all that? So yeah, that could be a whole nother topic. But one other thing I want to touch upon, Joseph, that ties into the question that we got earlier. First, second week in December, I always get clients who come in, fight over Christmas holidays, right? Little Johnny's finishing school in a week. And I said, okay, well, what's your parenting plan say? What's your agreement say? It says, literally, Christmas to be shared equally, right? How do you enforce that? Is that 3 days on, week about, you get them until New Year's, and you get, you know, where's Christmas morning? So this, you know, simplicity can create a lot of problems, right? Christmas Day is Christmas morning, where the kids are going to open up the gifts. If you got a young kid, that's a big deal. It's usually bigger for the parents than the kids. But this simple parenting plan that's unclear in terms of specifics creates a lot of problems when there's a dispute, and you're usually rushing off to your lawyer's office or the mediator or the court. So sometimes complex can be good. Sorry to cut you off, Joseph, but we're gonna add.
No, you did. I was just gonna say that oftentimes too, we see that parents sometimes want to disguise their interests as being the best interest of the child, and it's very apparent. No matter how Houdini you think you are, it's apparent to us, it's apparent to opposing counsel, it's apparent to judges. So you're not fooling anyone.
Little Johnny comes home and says, I want 15 days a month with daddy. Well, kids don't count days that way. But Shanza, what do you think of all this?
I think what Joe said and what everyone else kind of talked about, you know, sometimes it becomes a fight between the parents, right?
Yeah.
They want maximum contact, right? They derail from what's in the best interest of the children. And sometimes they're coming from, oh, I want to be the better parent. I want to be the, you know, the cool parent, the fun parent, the parent, you know, who gets to do all the fun activities. Like, step back and really just think about the children. Because I know you're separating, a lot of times not on good terms, you know, but you need to kind of look at the bigger picture, think of the children, don't just fight your spouse. Look at the children and their interests. I mean, that's my little message.
I've seen parents cut down in court where they stand up and say, I want my access, right? Well, just, it's not about you, right? This is about your child, and that whole framework, that whole mindset, right? This is like a property issue. Well, it's not. It's best interest of the child. Great point, Shanza.
Russ, can I just make a quick clarifying comment? Because I think our audience is getting a bit confused. I just wanted to clarify that the term maximum contact and the principles surrounding that, the wording actually doesn't exist in the Divorce Act anymore. I just want to make that clear. So when we speak about maximum contact, the wording is not necessarily in the Divorce Act, and the changes to the Divorce Act have been made. But what it means, I'm actually going to read it verbatim here because it's just easier. The heading is actually now parenting time consistent with best interests of child. And what that means is, in allocating parenting time, the court shall give effect to the principle that a child should have as much time with each spouse as is consistent with the best interests of the child.
Yeah.
So that comes from the Divorce Act.
Lots of questions about best interest. The best interest of the child is defined by the Children's Law Reform Act and the Divorce Act. So if you need that test, there are 8-10 factors we look at. Judges look at it. It's not determined by counsel. No one factor outweighs the other. But that's the analysis courts will go through using their discretion and other evidence that's available to determine what's in the best interest. But great questions come in. Thank you so much to our audience.
I think we had some pretty insightful conversations on parenting time. I do want to switch gears now a little bit and talk about decision making. So that's the kind of second aspect of parenting plan. So there's parenting time and then there's decision making. Russ, I'm hoping you can share your thoughts on how parents should go about handling decision making when it comes to things like education, health, religion.
You know, I got a story about everything, right? So I love this topic. Whoever gave me this one, thank you. So you could take, in the old days for me is pre-pandemic, right? 10 different lawyers, 10 different opinions in terms of joint custody, sole custody. We don't use that language anymore, but this was the analysis you'd get when you go see a lawyer, and people thinking, okay, I'm getting custody, I'm winning, you're an access parent, you lost, right? And so we removed the language. We've got parenting time and contact orders, and language is less aggressive and easier to come to a compromise. But every time, we get clients coming in the office, and what's the difference, right? Well, the big differences are religious upbringing, health decisions, education. Those always come up. And for most Canadian families who have raised their children for a period of time, could be a short period of time, could be a long period of time, a lot of those decisions are made. They've decided what the child's religion is going to be. They're in the public healthcare system. Most families defer to their family doctors for medical decisions, or an expert if a doctor is recommended. Jehovah's Witnesses are an example of people who do not. Education. Most families have decided by the time they're getting a separation or divorce whether the child's going to go to public or private or Catholic school education. Oftentimes, the children are already in that Catholic school or in the public school or have gone to private school. So a lot of those decisions, the big ones, have already been made. When you go through a separation and divorce, or if you're going to get a parenting plan and negotiate a settlement, oftentimes the status quo, meaning what you did during the course of your relationship, is going to continue, unless there's a good reason not to continue with that. For example, you're separated, you now have 2 homes to pay for, 2 budgets, 2 car payments, 2 sets of clothing. Maybe your family separated unit can no longer afford private school. Maybe you have to go to public school, for example, because you're no longer pooling your resources. You have 2 households to upkeep. Maybe you've met a new partner who is a different religion than you are, and you want to convert. So maybe you want your child to be exposed to that. That might be something new. But a lot of these big examples of where you think there's going to be a fundamental dispute that can't be resolved through a parenting plan or negotiation, when you dig down deep and you look at the issues, most of these issues have been decided, or there's a way you can compromise that's going to satisfy both homes and both parents while being in the best interest of the children. So that's the way I would approach decision making. In terms of very specific decision making, getting down to the granular, I might bring in a parenting professional or a parenting coordinator or a third party, maybe a social worker or a family professional to assist with decisions. If it's a medical decision, you might rely on the advice of the family doctor or the expert involved. And if it's a religious decision, you may come up with a plan that celebrates both religions or no religion. Who knows? So that's the way I would approach it, but certainly don't, in my view, spend a lot of resources, if possible, arguing over this. The money could be better spent on a college education fund, taking the kids to Disneyland or somewhere else on a family trip. Keep that money in your family unit. Try not to dissipate it through disputes through the court system or otherwise. But what's your take on this, Shanza? What do you think?
I think those are some very, very good points, Russ. You know, we've covered both parenting time here and decision making. And Russ, you make some really great points about approaching both of these aspects of parenting plan. I know from the beginning, we've kind of been hitting on how we want the plan to be detailed and comprehensive, but I do want to take a few minutes, kind of talk about flexibility, because I don't want that to kind of get lost while we talk about it's super important for the plan to be comprehensive, but sometimes it's easy to get lost in the weeds of the substance of the plan and the present arrangements. You don't always focus on the larger picture and the fact that you want a plan that can be implemented into the future. And so you wanted to capture life changes and adjustments over time. You don't want it to be too rigid. I think rigid pre-planned schedules can be sometimes difficult to put into practice. No matter how well you plan, there could be events in your child's life, in little Johnny's life, that will interrupt careful planning. There might be school events, special trips that little Johnny needs or wants to attend. What if they want to spend a certain time or day with a particular parent? You can't plan every day, so you can't anticipate all these changes. As life goes on, families, they transition through phases and changes. You know, it could be, you know, children grow older, their needs change. One parent could relocate to a new home. You know, dad right now lives 45 minutes away. Maybe he moves further away. Who knows? Making it harder to follow the plan. Maybe the new work schedule cannot accommodate the responsibilities that you undertook while you were drafting the plan. And as your job changes, you can't continue with those responsibilities, or it's becoming really hard. One parent loses their job. So there can be a number of things that can happen. So in that sense, I think flexibility is a very important aspect of a parenting plan. Some things to consider for having more flexibility could be things like don't focus too much on rules. Sometimes making too many rules can cause problems. Young children in particular, they don't always understand complex parenting rules. And if they perceive you as being too harsh, too rigid, or unfair to your co-parent, nobody wins. In those cases, it can make sense to have more open guidelines than just having very strict parenting rules. No matter your kid's age, it helps to ask them what they prefer and try to make that work instead of what you would have planned for the kids. And Steph, you mentioned that a little bit in the beginning as well, having a protocol built into the plan for schedule change requests is also a great idea. Overall, just remember to be flexible. Things may not go as planned, but that's all right. Any comments from the panel?
Steph?
Right. Sorry, I was just like, you know, flexibly, there's a few key terms that all of us harp on, and it's for a good reason. Communication, flexibility, in a sense, compromise, and then the all-encompassing best interest of the child. So I think really those four things should always be at the forefront whenever you're sitting down and having those conversations with one another. If you don't have those four things, oftentimes your plan's not going to be it's not going to be a success. So I think just always keeping those four things at the front of your mind is crucial.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say, you know, flexibility and a lot of these topics that we're discussing today, you know, if only every, separation was smooth sailing. We understand that it's a very emotional time. You're not, things might get turbulent. You might disagree on things. But if you're at a point where it's super high conflict and, there's, creeping of what we call parental alienation, or, one parent is just digging their heels in and, disguising, like Joseph mentioned, disguising best interest of the child as something that's actually that parent's interest. Those are more niche and more specific areas. I know we've had a couple questions come in about that, but we are going to be speaking in the next few weeks. I believe next week is high conflict separation and divorce, and the week after is understanding and preventing parental alienation. So I just wanted to make our audience aware that those two topics are coming up. So if your questions or your what you'd like to learn more about falls more under those more high conflict categories, just remember to register for those coming up. Sorry.
We got it all. We got
We
it
got it
all.
all.
Stay tuned. Tell your friends and family. Tune in. And thank you, everybody. The questions have been great tonight.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, so before we move on to our next topic, I think another question that we get a lot is, how do you make your agreement legally enforceable? So before we move on, let me just take my hosting privileges and speak a few minutes on this again. And to answer that question, I think in some amicable relationships, the parents might decide to just keep the agreement between themselves, mostly to avoid court, or they don't see the need to legally enforce it because of a healthy co-parenting relationship. There's communication. They think they can communicate and work it out. I think it's still a good idea to have it legally enforced. If you have an agreement, you can submit it to the court to get it legalized. If you're married and you're getting a divorce, you'll have the agreement included in your divorce order. Remember that you can't get divorced until you make proper, reasonable arrangements for the children. And then if you get your agreement legalized, you can get it enforced. So if there are any support terms, the Family Responsibility Office can enforce the support terms of the agreement if you do have your agreement legalized. A Family Responsibility Office is I think we talked about this quite a bit in the first couple of weeks. So it's a government organization, and they have the authority to enforce and collect support payments against the payor spouse. Legalizing the agreement also limits changes to the agreement. So if there is no consent to the change, the party who wants to change it will have to go to court to get those changes enforced. And I think this segues into your topic, Joe, which you're going to speak about, and you can take the floor from now on. Can you go into what parents do if they can't agree, and how they should deal with disagreements, or if they need changes to the plan?
Yeah, so obviously we understand that we don't live in a perfect world. Not like Steph said, there's going to be cases that are more high conflict than others. Obviously there's going to be cases that are more amicable than others. But when parents are unable to sort of agree on certain aspects, or even the entirety of the parenting plan, there are several steps that co-parents can take to resolve any differences they may have. First being is mediation. So parties can consider using a neutral third party mediator to help facilitate discussions and assist them in reaching a compromise. Mediation can provide a structured, supportive environment for parents to express their concerns, allows them to explore potential solutions, and ultimately to work together to develop a parenting plan that meets the needs of both the parents and the children. I believe it was last week we sent a list off, or a link to mediators where you can find them. Fees range from free to a sliding scale based on parties' income. So that's always a great place to start. Something that Shanza mentioned in our introductions is the idea of collaborative practice, collaborative law. Collaborative law involves each parent hiring their own attorney who is trained in collaborative practice, and the attorneys work together with the parents to negotiate a parenting plan outside of court. with the help of family professionals. So in this case, it would be a family professional specialized in creating those parenting plans. It could be a social worker, can be a psychologist, all those different groups to help create those parenting plans. And this approach encourages open communication and cooperation while also providing legal guidance and support through your respective lawyers. Another tool that parties can use is a parenting coordinator. So in some cases, parents may choose to appoint a parenting coordinator who is also like a mediator, a third party who's neutral, and they have that expertise in child development and family dynamics. And these parenting coordinators can help resolve disputes related to the parenting plan, as well as make recommendations to the parents based on the best interest of the children. And sometimes we can even give them sort of arbitration powers, so their decision can actually be final and legally binding. Another way that parents can sort of try to resolve or tackle these issues head on before they become greater concerns or greater issues are parenting classes. Some courts actually may even require parents to attend parenting classes or workshops to learn effective co-parenting strategies and communication skills. And these classes can help parents develop those tools they need to work together collaboratively and resolve disputes in a constructive manner without even having to go to court or even hire attorneys. Finally, obviously the way in which no one wants to go, given for a variety of factors, I'll get into it, but that's court intervention. If mediation, if those parenting classes, if the collaborative approaches are unsuccessful, parents may need to seek court intervention to resolve their disagreements. What happens is that each parent presents their case to a judge, who's a third party, who knows nothing about you guys, knows nothing about your children, knows nothing about your lives, your circumstances, only what's on the 5 or 6 pages that they allow when you submit your documents. So it's really important to note that these court proceedings can be time-consuming, costly, and adversarial. So it's always generally preferable to try to resolve any disputes you guys have outside of court. Like I said, you don't want a third-party person who doesn't know you, doesn't know your children, doesn't know your life, making decisions that ultimately impact your lives. So it's always something that you should keep at the forefront.
Couple quick questions about our rates. Call us, we'll tell you our rates that they go across the board based on the experience of our lawyers. Register for future webinars. I think we're posting 5 or 6 at a time. Keep going back to the registration page or sign up for our newsletter. And a list of possible mediators. We do have a ebook coming out on parenting plans and custody or parenting time. 30-40 page ebook includes lists of lawyers, family professionals, mediators. Send us an email, we'll get that out to you. A couple things I want to unpack on that, Joseph. That was really good. In simple terms, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So what do you do if you can't agree on certain aspects? Well, what you can't agree, reduce it to writing, sign off on it, right? You've got 90% of your parenting plan done. Fantastic. Don't go back. Get that off the table. The 1 or 2 things that are outstanding, we have a 3-hour presentation we do. There's a video on it. Again, emails, we'll give it to you. It deals just with impasse. So I did this with Carrie Heinzel and Jonathan Painter. She's a financial professional. Jonathan is a mediator and a family professional and an arbitrator. He teaches at York University. We did this presentation to the International Association of Collaborative Professionals. We're doing it again in another month in Boston. All we do is talk about impasse, and we give you tools and tips and tricks to get through impasse. Impasse is when 2 people can't agree on something and it looks like you've hit a wall and everything's falling apart. You need to normalize impasse when doing a parenting plan. Remember, this is a normal part of the process. You're going to hit impasse. You come up with creative ways to get through it. Oftentimes, people hit an impasse for reasons unrelated to the issue they're talking about. There's an underlying need or goal or an interest that's not getting satisfied. And we need to discover that and talk about it. Many times in many files, I find impasse usually comes 80–90% of the way through the negotiation. I know it's coming, but that's a sign that we're almost done, right? We get through this hurdle. Usually the rest of the parenting plan or the rest of the negotiation or the rest of the case settles fairly quickly after that. So sometimes impasse can be a good sign. Look for a video online. Great question. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Sorry for interrupting.
No, for sure. Great points, Russ. Like you said, impasse comes up. Like, it's okay if it comes up. I think that's, and what I want to emphasize on, and I know, Joe, you brought up going to mediation, arbitration. So I'll just take now a few minutes to talk about alternate dispute resolution and more so just having lawyers and third parties involved in the process to help with impasse or disagreement. If communication is an issue between you and your spouse, you can have the lawyers as third parties. They can communicate on your behalf, help you negotiate the terms of the plan. And sometimes it's easier for the third person to do the talking for you, maybe because of the conflict, because of your personalities, of what you're going through. It's not always easy for parents to communicate on their own. And so having like third parties come in at that point can be very beneficial and can help the process move forward. Lawyers know the rights and responsibilities that parents have, so they can make sure that the plan you're entering in is legally binding. It covers your rights and responsibilities. I know next up, I'm going to have Steph talk about support obligations. So that's something that lawyers can ensure you're meeting those obligations. They can ensure there's proper structure and the wording of the agreement is covers what you're trying to communicate, what you're trying to establish, and they can make sure that the agreement is legally binding in that sense. The mediator, if we talk about mediators, they are neutral third parties. Having a mediator present can really help the parents like communicate to the mediator their concerns, what they want, their goals, and both parents can do that. And the mediator is there to ensure that both your concerns are heard. They're trained to minimize conflict. They're great with coming up with solutions. So they're there to ensure that the process remains fair to both parties. All in all, if there is conflict, do look at lawyers, attempt mediation. It really helps having these third parties kind of come in and move the process along. So Steph, I know I just hinted at it. I need you right now. I'm hoping you can talk about, support obligations, child support, and how to incorporate that into the agreement.
Absolutely. So I know a few weeks ago we did a deeper dive on child support, but it's always important to remember that child support and your parenting plan are going to impact one another. Prior to separation or when parties were living together, both incomes were flowing to one household. So once parents separate and two homes are being established, child support takes into consideration where the child or where the children are living. So parenting schedules and child support are very much intertwined in that way. And it's also why one of the first questions that we ask when calculating child support is, well, where are the children residing? Or where is the child residing? If little Johnny, little Timmy, little Jimmy, if he's living primarily with one parent, the non-resident parent's child support obligation will likely be higher to balance out the amount of money or the amount of income that flows to the children. If it changes and little Johnny, Timmy, Laura, Lucy, if they're living in a shared parenting arrangement, and just a caveat to that, shared doesn't mean 50-50. The law establishes that if one parent has the child or the children in their care for at least 40% of the time, that's still considered shared parenting. So if that occurs, then the child support that flows is known as the set-off amount. So say, again, Joseph and Shanza, they're my parents. I live with Joe 60% of the time, and I live with Shanza 40% of the time. Technically, Joe is going to owe Shanza child support for when I'm in her care, and Shanza owes Joe child support for when I'm in his care. So rather than money exchanging hands twice, we look at what the difference is in those two values. And that difference or that set-off amount is what's exchanged. So that those values, that's when we sort of get into a deeper dive of child support, where we look at the incomes of the parents, the age of the children, what happens when I go off to school and I'm, living in residence for the majority of the year. What's the summer child support? So that's a whole nother topic. But it is really important to think about and turn your mind to how the parenting plan needs to incorporate provisions and detail child support. And also, if the parenting schedule does change from primary to shared or shared to primary, then the child support will need to be adjusted accordingly as well. So that's why, like we've mentioned, having dispute resolution clauses, being flexible, it's important to have those provisions in your parenting agreement to outline the fact that you're going to exchange income documentations every year. Because what happens if Shanza's income skyrockets? She got a great promotion. She's going to go, she's now making millions and millions of dollars.
She started working in a different law firm, right?
So yeah, so it's important to ensure you have those provisions about the annual exchange of disclosure, and also what circumstances might trigger a review of the agreement. If the parenting time shifts, because Joseph got a promotion or got a new job and now he's, living in Germany or, England. So that's obviously going to impact parenting. So, we don't have a magic crystal ball, but we can do our best to put in protocols, put in safeguards so that when something that's not, you couldn't have predicted comes up, you have the stepping stones, you have the guidelines on how to progress through that change and how to overcome that change. So you don't necessarily have to go back to lawyers. Maybe the trickle effect is already detailed in your agreement and you just go back to that to adjust accordingly. So those are just my 2 cents about child support. I'm not sure if we're going to do another topic later about a deeper dive into child support. I know we did in the past, but just remember that, everything is very much connected. So definitely reach out, get independent legal advice, talk to a lawyer, so those little things don't fall through the cracks.
Yeah, we can talk for an hour on this or longer, but we do have more presentations on child support and set off child support. Great summary stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steph. All this talk about conflict, Russ, it'll be great if we can hear some pointers from you before we leave for today. Like, what do you think are some ways parents can communicate, co-parent? I know there's a lot of questions coming in about disagreements and conflicts, so we would love to hear from you on what are your thoughts on effectively co-parenting under parenting plan.
Yeah, let's hit some questions here. At what stage of the flow chart does the court get involved? Not really a parenting plan question, but I think the court will get involved if there's a contested motion or a trial. How do you spell the word Russ is saying? Put it in the chat. I'm not sure what you guys are talking about there. What if you don't agree on where the primary residence resides? Maybe look at a nesting agreement where the kids stay in the home and the parents move in and out. Try to come up with an agreement to get you from today, assuming you're in mediation or parenting negotiation today, to your next meeting without prejudice, right? Get through the next 3-4 weeks, trying to maintain the status quo. Strategically did 38% for monetary purposes. Well, again, lots of gamesmanship around child support set off. Again, the focus is the primary best interest of the children, not who's going to get the set off child support. That's where your focus should be. Don't start counting days. I've had parents who wanted increased parenting time. And I said, well, fine, this is my client. So continue to pay guideline support. Just take that argument off the table, because the other parent's going to say you want more time because you want to pay this. They continue to pay the full load on child support because they want the increased parenting time. It's a very effective way to call the bluff in somebody's argument by fleshing out some of these details. Past webinars and YouTube, familyllb.com for our YouTube channel, Family Law Now podcasts for podcasts and webinars are populated on our YouTube channel. So thank you everyone for submitting your inquiries and your questions. It's been a fantastic night tonight. Okay, effective communication. Joseph already covered this off. You can go to tech, you have apps. My Family Wizard is a good one that will tell you if maybe you're being overly sarcastic or rude in your messages. It also keeps track of messages between parents. App Close, which was recommended to me recently by Justice Gonzalez. He's a judge in the Central East region in the Superior Court of Justice. Really neat website, appclose.com, lots of tools there. There are parenting plans and communication guidelines available online. If you want, we can give you more resources. In our show notes tonight, we will include in with the follow-up survey the rules for separated parents, which is a great, just common sense approach to communication. So that's not using children as spies, not using children as the go-between, just basic rules you wouldn't think you'd have to write down. But unfortunately, parents going through a separation and divorce, they kind of get caught up in the fog of war, right? They're so upset. They're so, they think should be some retribution for something that went on in the past, and they're not being child focused. So that's a really effective tool. Joseph and Steph talked about this. Use some common sense and use some horse sense, right? You're going to have to compromise. Little Cindy or little Johnny might have a hockey tournament that they made playoffs and they're going to play Sunday night, game 3. If it's going into your parenting time, that's fine. You're going to want your child to be part of that sporting activity. You're going to need to compromise and bend a little bit and put your child's interests ahead of your own. I find it's very effective, especially with high conflict families, parents going at it, to perhaps reduce everything to writing and be very specific, whether it's sharing information, sharing medical appointments, sharing school appointments, sharing curricular activities, game times, practices. Whatever it is, put it in detail, send it on by email or text or something that we can reproduce. So if there is a dispute, judges won't admit this. Text messages technically are an evidence. It's the first thing they read because they get fairly quickly to who the problem parent is by the language, the tone, the cadence, frequency, the demeanor in these messages, whether they're child focused or whether they're more vengeful. So having a written form of communication, electronic or otherwise, can be very useful later. But also, you don't have to go to that. You can use your apps, right? Now, some people are so upset. We counsel and our law clerks, who are fantastic, by the way, will act as a buffer. So if you're not sure the message is appropriate, send it to us. We'll filter it out. We'll coach you. We'll help you understand effective communication. It could be expensive to have your lawyer do that extensively. It's good at the front end when things are hot and there's heated ongoing disputes. But we can also bring a family professional in to coach you through the process to help you work on your communication skills. Maybe you need individual counseling apart from family counseling or counseling for the children. Maybe you need help to get you through whatever cycle of the separation process that you're in, or whatever trauma that you experience. Maybe you're a victim of domestic violence or something even worse. Maybe there's been parenting abuse during the course of the relationship that you need professional help with. We can bring in the professionals to assist you with that, co-parent effectively, simply because you've got a rocky relationship with the child's other parent. doesn't mean you cannot co-parent effectively. And a story we often hear in court at case management conferences is, when your daughter or little Johnny is getting married in 20 years from now, do you and the other parent want to both be in the same room, or do you want to be excluded from that ceremony? That starts with the way you communicate effectively today in the parenting plans that you develop. So how to get little Johnny and little Cindy in on that story, but those are my viewpoints. What do you guys think of all that? Joseph, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think you summed it up quite nicely. I think, like I said, we don't live in a perfect world. We know out there that there's parents who don't get along, for whatever reason, whether it's through adultery or any other issues. But as hard as you think it is, like Steph mentioned, you're going to be intertwined with that person for the foreseeable future, because you produce such a great child that you want to hold dear to your hearts, and you don't want to, estrange from both of your parents. You don't want them to grow up, or her to grow up, with not knowing two loving parents who are able to work together for the sake of their own development. So as hard as it may be, like I said, there's always those key things, the open communication, the compromise that really have to be there. And we understand it's difficult. We know what you guys are going through. But we just reiterated that it's really important. And if that means, like Russ said, you have to go your own counseling, your own therapy, parenting classes, whatever you feel you need to take it, so that you are in that position to have that mindset, is crucial.
Shanza, Steph, you want to jump in on that?
I could just retweet exactly what Joe and Russ just said. Absolutely. Yeah, always focus on the
Thumbs
children.
up and the like emoji or whatever that is.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I think it helps to see as your ex-spouse as the parent of your child, as opposed to, seeing them as the opposing party or your opponent. And I think that really put things into perspective.
Yeah, and statistics show, right? Kids who have a healthy relationship with both parents end up being much more successful members of society. The ones that are estranged, or they don't have a good relationship with both parents, sometimes commit suicide, get involved in drugs and other addictions, drop out of school, usually enter the youth criminal justice system, and then graduate to become adult criminals. So it all starts with you. It all starts with parents right now. You're going to guide this child and help him or her be successful. So, I think it's really great that you're listening to this program and watching this event, but lots of services out there to help you through the process.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Russ, Steph, Joe, for an amazing session. It's time we wrap up. Well, thank you
Great
for our
job
audience for
tonight,
joining us today. Anything?
Shanza, I want to thank everybody, our audience, for joining us. Joseph and Steph, fantastic. Great playlist. Oh my God, I'm going to listen to that on the way home. It was just great.
Yeah, thank you for that, Steph. And we will see you next week.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.